Money rules you must learn before your 30s. You know that feeling when you're sitting at brunch with friends and someone casually mentions they just maxed out their Roth IRA for the year, and you're sitting there thinking, wait, I should probably know what that is, right? And then someone else starts talking about compound interest and tax advantage accounts, and you're nodding along like you totally get it. But honestly, you're just hoping the conversation moves to something else before anyone asks your opinion. Yeah, that feeling. It's weirdly specific and also completely universal. Here's the thing, and I think this is where a lot of us get tripped up. Nobody actually sits us down and teaches us this stuff. Like, we spend years learning about the Pythagorean theorem and memorizing dates from history, which sure, great, but then we get thrown into the real world and we're supposed to just figure out money? It's bizarre when you think about it. We're expected to navigate credit scores, retirement accounts, investment strategies, and tax optimization with basically zero formal training. It's like being handed the keys to a car without ever taking a driving lesson and being told, "Good luck, don't crash." My name is Adam, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to build wealth almost effortlessly, while others work just as hard but never quite get ahead. And what I've realized over the years, through my own mistakes, through watching friends struggle with the same patterns, through countless conversations about money that people are usually too uncomfortable to have, is that the difference rarely comes down to how much you earn. It's about the rules you learn early, or don't learn. And if you don't learn them before your 30s, you end up spending your 30s, 40s, and sometimes even your 50s trying to undo the damage. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Not some get-rich-quick scheme or investment hack that sounds too good to be true, because it probably is. We're going to talk about the fundamental rules, the ones that actually matter, the ones that separate people who achieve financial freedom from people who feel trapped by money their entire lives. And some of these might sound simple, maybe even obvious, but here's the thing about obvious truths. Knowing them intellectually and actually living them are two completely different things. Rule 1. Your income is not your wealth. Let me tell you about my friend Lewis. Smart guy, works in tech, makes, probably around $120,000 a year. Good money, right? You'd think he'd be doing pretty well financially. But every time we grab drinks, he's stressed about money. He's got the nice apartment in the trendy neighborhood, drives a newish car, always has the latest phone, takes these Instagram-worthy trips a few times a year, and he's broke. Not actually broke, obviously, but functionally broke, living paycheck to paycheck on 6 figures. And then there's this other person I know, let's call her Sarah, who makes maybe $60,000 working as a teacher, and she's building wealth, like real wealth. She's got money invested, she's got a solid emergency fund, she's on track to retire comfortably, maybe even early if she wants to. What's the difference? Lewis thinks his income is his wealth. He sees that $120K salary and feels wealthy, so he spends like he's wealthy. Sarah understands that wealth isn't what you make, it's what you keep. It's what you accumulate over time. It's the gap between what comes in and what goes out. This is probably the most fundamental rule, and it's the one people violate most often. We live in a culture that's obsessed with income. How much do you make? Is the question everyone wants to ask, but usually doesn't because it's rude. But wealth is quiet. Wealth is patient. Wealth is that teacher driving a 10-year-old Honda while secretly sitting on $400,000 in investments. Here's what this means, practically. If you make $80,000 a year and save $15,000 of it, you are building wealth faster than someone making $150,000 and saving $5,000. The math is simple, but psychologically, it's hard. Because we're constantly surrounded by messages telling us that we deserve nice things, that we've earned it, that life's too short not to enjoy our money. And all of that is sort of true, but it's also incomplete. The real question isn't whether you can afford something. The real question is, what is this costing me in future freedom? That $800 a month car payment might fit in your budget, but it's also $800 that could be working for you. Compounding, building the kind of wealth that eventually means you don't have to think about money anymore. Before your 30s, you need to internalize this. Your income is your tool, but your wealth is your goal, and they're not the same thing. Rule 2. Compound interest is actually magic, but only if you start early. Okay, so everyone talks about compound interest. You've probably heard the term 1,000 times. It's basically become a cliche at this point, the eighth wonder of the world and all that. But here's the thing, it actually is kind of magical, and most people don't truly understand how powerful it is because they've never seen it work over decades. Let me break this down in a way that might actually hit home. If you invest $5,000 a year starting at age 25, and you do that until you're 35, so just 10 years, $50,000 total, and then you stop and never invest another dollar, but you let it grow at an average of 8% per year until you're 65, you'll have roughly $787,000. Now, if your friend waits until they're 35 to start, but then they invest $5,000 every year from 35 to 65, that's 30 years, $150,000 total invested, they'll end up with around $611,000. Read that again. You invested less money, $50K versus $150K. You invested for less time, 10 years versus 30 years, but you ended up with more money. That's compound interest. That's time in the market. That's starting early. The reason this matters so much before your 30s is because your 20s are, financially speaking, the most valuable decade of your life. Not because you're making the most money, you're probably making the least, but because every dollar you invest in your 20s has 30 or 40 years to grow. It's like planting a tree. You can plant it now and have shade in 20 years, or you can wait 20 years and then plant it and, well, you'll still be waiting for shade. I know what you're thinking. Adam, I can barely pay rent. How am I supposed to invest? And look, I get it. Your 20s are expensive. You're probably underpaid. You might have student loans. You're trying to build a life. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even small amounts matter enormously over time. $100 a month invested from 22 to 30 will likely outperform $500 a month invested from 30 to 40. The math just works that way. So the rule is this: start now. Start small if you have to, but start. Open a Roth IRA. Set up automatic contributions to a low-cost index fund. Even if it's just $50 a month, you're building a habit and you're capturing that precious time in the market. You can always increase the amount later when you're earning more, but you can never get back the years. Rule 3. Debt is not all created equal. Here's where things get a bit more nuanced, because our culture has this weird relationship with debt. Some people treat all debt like it's evil, like any borrowing is a moral failure. Other people are way too comfortable with it, putting everything on credit cards and justifying it with everyone has debt. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and the distinction you need to understand before your 30s is between productive debt and destructive debt. Productive debt is debt that helps you build wealth or increase your earning potential. A reasonable student loan for a degree that leads to a well-paying career, that's productive debt. A mortgage on a house you can afford that's building equity, productive debt. Even a small business loan, if it's helping you build something valuable, can be productive. Destructive debt is debt used to finance consumption. Credit card debt from buying clothes, gadgets, dinners out, a car loan for a vehicle that's way more expensive than you need, financing a vacation because you couldn't wait to save for it. This kind of debt makes you poorer. It's paying interest to feel wealthy now at the expense of actually being wealthy later. And here's the part that really matters. Destructive debt compounds against you, just like investments compound for you. If you're carrying a $5,000 credit card balance at 22% interest and only making minimum payments, you're going to pay thousands in interest over the years. That's thousands that could have been working for you, building wealth, creating freedom. Instead, it's working against you, creating a hole you have to climb out of before you can even start building up. Before your 30s, you need to get ruthlessly honest about your debt. Make a list. Every loan, every balance, every payment. Know what you owe and why you owe it. Then attack the destructive debt aggressively. Pay it off as fast as you can. Stop accumulating more of it. I don't care if you have to drive a beat-up car and skip trendy restaurants for a year, get that weight off your shoulders. Because here's what changes when you're debt-free. Your options explode. You can take risks, you can change careers, you can invest more aggressively, you can travel, you can say no to jobs or situations you don't like. That is fundamentally about trading future freedom for present consumption. And when you're in your 20s, you're trading away the most valuable years of freedom you'll ever have. Rule 4. Building an emergency fund is not sexy, but it changes everything. Nobody gets excited about emergency funds. I know this. There's no Instagram post that makes an emergency fund look cool. You can't flex about having 3 months of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account. It's boring. It's unsexy. It just sits there. And that's exactly why most people don't have one. But here's what I've learned from watching people navigate life in their 20s and 30s. The people with emergency funds navigate crises completely differently than the people without them. They just do. When your car breaks down and you need $1,200 in repairs, it's either a minor inconvenience or a financial crisis, depending on whether you have that emergency fund. When you lose your job, it's either a stressful but manageable transition or an immediate disaster. When you have a medical issue, when your laptop dies, when your apartment floods and you need to cover a deductible, all of these things happen to everyone eventually. The emergency fund is what determines whether these events derail your life or just become annoying stories you tell later. There's also this psychological component that's harder to quantify, but maybe even more important. When you have an emergency fund, you make better decisions. You don't stay in a toxic job because you're terrified of missing a paycheck. You don't accept exploitative terms because you're desperate. You don't make panicked, short-term choices that hurt you in the long run. You have options, and having options changes how you move through the world. So here's the practical rule. Before you get aggressive with investing, before you start thinking about buying property, before you make any major financial moves, build an emergency fund. Start with $1,000 if that's all you can manage. Then aim for 1 month of expenses, then 3 months, then 6 months. Keep it in a high-yield savings account where you can access it if you need to, but where it's not so accessible that you're tempted to dip into it for non-emergencies. And be honest about what constitutes an emergency. A sale at your favorite store is not an emergency. Tickets to a concert are not an emergency. A true emergency is something unexpected that threatens your health, safety, or ability to maintain your life. This is one of those rules that seems obvious, but that most people violate constantly. They tell themselves they'll build an emergency fund later, after they buy the new phone, after the trip, after they update their wardrobe. And then something goes wrong and they end up taking on credit card debt to handle it, which puts them even further behind. Don't be that person. Build the fund. You'll sleep better. Trust me. Rule 5. Your 30-year-old self will thank you for living below your means now. This one's tough because it requires you to do something that feels almost un-American. Deliberately choose to live below your means when you could be living right at the edge of them. Here's the pattern I see all the time. Someone gets their first real job out of college. They're making, let's say, $50,000. They move into an apartment that costs about 35% of their take-home pay. They lease a decent car, they buy nice work clothes, they go out with friends, and at the end of each month, their bank account is roughly the same as it was at the start, maybe a little less. Then they get a raise. Now they're making $60,000. Amazing. Except they move to a nicer apartment, they upgrade the car, they eat out more, they take nicer vacations, and at the end of each month, their bank account is still roughly the same. They're making more, but they're not building wealth. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's probably the single biggest thing that keeps people from achieving financial independence. Every time your income goes up, your expenses go up to match. You're on a treadmill, running faster and faster, but never actually getting anywhere. The alternative, and this is the rule you need to internalize before your 30s, is to live below your means intentionally and let the gap grow as your income increases. When you get that raise from 50K to 60K, keep living like you make 50K and invest the difference. When you get to 70K, keep living like you make 50K or 55K or whatever. The point is to consciously decouple your lifestyle from your income. I know this sounds like I'm saying never enjoy your money, live like a monk, eat ramen forever. That's not what I'm saying. You can absolutely enjoy your life, have experiences, buy things that matter to you, but do it consciously, not automatically. Ask yourself, is this purchase moving me towards my goals or away from them? Is this expense bringing me real, lasting value, or is it just status signaling? Am I buying this because I genuinely want it or because I think I should want it? Because here's what happens when you master the skill in your 20s. By your 30s, you've built wealth, real wealth, the kind that gives you options. And then something really interesting happens. You get to choose your lifestyle based on what actually makes you happy, not based on what you can barely afford. Lewis, the guy I mentioned earlier making 120K but always stressed, he's locked into that income. He needs it to maintain his lifestyle. He can't take a pay cut to pursue something he's passionate about. He can't take time off to travel. He can't start a business because he needs that steady paycheck. His income owns him. Sarah, making less but saving more, she's building freedom. In a few years, she'll have options Lewis can only dream about. That's the power of living below your means. Rule 6. Investing doesn't require you to be an expert. There's this weird thing that happens with investing where people think they need to become experts before they can start. They think they need to understand the stock market, know how to read financial statements, have opinions about which sectors are poised for growth. And so they wait. They sit on the sidelines, keeping their money in checking accounts, earning basically nothing because they don't feel qualified to invest. Here's a secret. You don't need to be an expert. You really don't. The investment strategy that works for most people is also the simplest one. Buy low-cost index funds, contribute regularly, and don't touch it for decades. That's it. That's the whole strategy. An index fund is basically a fund that owns a little bit of everything. If you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you own a tiny piece of the 500 largest companies in America. When the market goes up, you go up. When it goes down, you go down. Over long periods, and I mean decades, not months, the market has historically gone up. Not every year, not every month, but over time. This approach requires no stock picking skills, no timing the market, no reading financial news. You just set up automatic contributions and let time do the work. It's boring, it's passive, and it's what pretty much every financial expert will tell you to do if you're a normal person trying to build wealth. Before your 30s, you need to get over the idea that investing is only for rich people or finance bros or people with special knowledge. It's not. It's for anyone who wants to build wealth over time. And the earlier you start, even with tiny amounts, the more powerful it becomes. Open a brokerage account. It takes like 10 minutes. Set up automatic contributions, even $25 a week. Buy a total market index fund or a target date retirement fund. Then forget about it. Check it maybe once a quarter, not daily. Don't panic when it goes down. It will go down sometimes. Don't get cocky when it goes up. Just let it sit there, compounding, doing its thing. The biggest mistake people make with investing isn't picking the wrong stocks. It's not investing at all. Rule 7. Your relationship with money is probably inherited, and you need to examine it. This one's less tactical and more psychological, but it might be the most important rule on this list. Your beliefs about money, your habits around money, your anxieties about money, most of them didn't originate with you. You inherited them from your parents, from your community, from your culture, from your early experiences. If you grew up in a household where money was always tight and every expense was stressful, you probably have anxiety around spending money even when you can afford things. If you grew up wealthy and never had to think about money, you might struggle with basic financial discipline because it was never necessary. If your parents fought about money, you might avoid financial conversations with your partner. If your parents never talked about money, you might feel like it's somehow shameful or taboo to discuss it. These inherited beliefs operate in the background of your mind, shaping your decisions in ways you're not even aware of. And here's the thing. Some of them are helpful, and some of them are sabotaging you. Before your 30s, you need to do the work of examining your relationship with money. Ask yourself some uncomfortable questions. Why do I feel the need to spend money when I'm stressed? Why does having money in my savings account make me anxious instead of secure? Why do I feel guilty when I spend money on myself, even for things I need? Why do I feel compelled to keep up with what my friends are buying? This isn't therapy. Or maybe it is. Actually, therapy can be great for this stuff. But it's about becoming conscious of the patterns, so you can choose different ones if they're not serving you. I'll give you a personal example. I used to have this weird guilt about spending money on experiences. Like I'd save money diligently, I'd invest, I'd do all the right things. But then when it came to actually spending money on something I wanted, a trip, a nice meal, a concert, I'd feel guilty. It felt wasteful. And I traced that back to messages I received growing up about money always needing to be saved for emergencies, that enjoying money was frivolous. Once I identified that pattern, I could challenge it. I could say, okay, I'm saving plenty, I'm investing, I've hit my goals. It's actually okay to enjoy some of this money. That's part of what it's for. And that shift made a huge difference in my quality of life. Your money patterns might be different, but I guarantee you have them. Everyone does. The question is whether you're going to let them run on autopilot or whether you're going to examine them and make conscious choices. The rule that ties everything together. Here's the thing about all of these rules. They're not really about money, not fundamentally. They're about freedom. They're about options. They're about building a life where you're making choices based on what you actually want, not based on what you can afford or what your financial stress is forcing you to do. Because that's what financial security actually gives you. It's not about being rich or buying fancy things. It's about waking up and not feeling that knot of anxiety in your stomach about money. It's about being able to say no to things that don't serve you. It's about having the space to think about what kind of life you want to build instead of just scrambling to survive. The people who figure this out before their 30s, who start saving early, who avoid destructive debt, who live below their means, who invest consistently, they're not necessarily smarter or more disciplined or better than anyone else. They just learn the rules early, and those rules compound over time just like investments do. Your 20s are when you set the trajectory. You can spend them living paycheck to paycheck, accumulating debt, putting off saving until you're making more money, and you'll hit your 30s still struggling with the same patterns. Or you can spend them learning these rules, building good habits, making conscious choices, and you'll hit your 30s with a foundation of wealth and options that most people don't achieve until their 40s or 50s, if ever. And look, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to buy things you regret. You're going to miss opportunities. You're going to feel behind sometimes when you see what other people are doing. That's all normal. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is being a little bit more financially conscious this year than you were last year, making slightly better decisions, building slightly better habits. Because here's the beautiful thing about money. It's one of the few areas of life where your past mistakes don't permanently define your future. You can start making better choices today, right now, this moment, and those choices will compound over time into real, tangible freedom. You've got time, not infinite time, but enough. Enough to learn these rules, enough to apply them, enough to build something real. Your 30-year-old self is out there waiting, and they're either going to thank you or resent you for the choices you're making right now. Make them the kind of choices that earn gratitude. Start today. Start small if you have to, but start. You've got this.